Imagine a life where you are no longer at the mercy of every little inconvenience, where your thoughts are not constantly filled with complaints or frustrations about the way things should be, but instead are focused on what is right, what is good, and what is possible. What if I told you that just one simple shift, one change in how you respond to the world, could transform not just your life, but the lives of everyone around you? Now, I know what you're thinking. This sounds too simple. It can't be that easy. But here's the truth, it is that simple. And over the next few minutes, I'm going to invite you into a powerful experiment, a 21-day challenge that will completely change the way you interact with the world. I'm talking about the 21-day no complaining experiment, a challenge that isn't just about silencing your complaints, but about unleashing your potential. Every day we are faced with thousands of moments to react, moments to speak, moments to choose. And often what we choose is to complain, whether it's about the traffic, the weather, a coworker, or a situation that didn't go our way. We find ourselves grumbling, venting, and getting caught in negativity. It's so easy to fall into this pattern. It's almost second nature. But here's the thing, complaining is like putting your energy into a leaking bucket. It drains you, it doesn't solve anything. It only serves to keep you stuck. So, what would happen if we stopped complaining for just 21 days? What if we gave ourselves permission to embrace a new way of being? One where we choose how we respond, how we feel, and how we engage with the world around us. What if, instead of reacting with frustration or negativity, we responded with power, clarity, and grace? This experiment is not about pretending life is perfect. It's not about denying that challenges exist or that things don't go your way. It's about learning how to navigate life's imperfections with a sense of purpose and possibility. It's about choosing to see the beauty, the lessons, or the opportunities even in the midst of discomfort. Over the next few minutes, we'll explore how this simple, yet profound, challenge can bring about massive shifts in your energy, your mindset, your relationships, and most importantly, your life. Because when you stop complaining, you stop giving away your power. You step into the driver's seat of your own experience. You begin to see that you are not a victim of your circumstances, but a creator of your reality. So let's dive in. Let's explore what happens when we stop complaining and start living with intention, with gratitude, and with the incredible power of choice. Complaining, it's a behavior so ingrained in our daily lives that we often don't recognize its presence. It's the sigh when the traffic light turns red, the groan when the Wi-Fi lags, when the muttered frustration when plans don't go as expected. But what exactly is complaining? At its core, complaining is the expression of dissatisfaction or annoyance about a situation. It's a verbal acknowledgement that something isn't aligning with our expectations or desires. While it's natural to voice concerns or seek empathy, habitual complaining can become a reflexive response to life's challenges, big or small. Consider the frequency of our complaints. Studies suggest that the average person complains between 15 to 30 times a day. That's a significant number of moments where we're focusing on the negative aspects of our experiences. Over time, this habitual focus can shape our worldview, making us more attuned to what's wrong rather than what's right. But why do we complain so much? Often it's a coping mechanism. Expressing dissatisfaction can provide temporary relief, a sense of validation, or a way to bond with others over shared grievances. However, when complaining becomes our default mode of communication, it can have detrimental effects on our mental and emotional well-being. Chronic complaining can reinforce a victim mentality, where we perceive ourselves as powerless in the face of adversity. This mindset can hinder personal growth, reduce resilience, and strain relationships. Moreover, it can create a feedback loop where negativity begets more negativity, making it challenging to break free from the cycle. It's essential to differentiate between constructive feedback and habitual complaining. Constructive feedback aims to address issues with the intent of finding solutions and fostering improvement. In contrast, habitual complaining often lacks a proactive component and serves more as an outlet for frustration without seeking resolution. The barking on the 21-day no complaining experiment is an invitation to become more mindful of our language and thought patterns. It's about recognizing the moments we default to complaints and choosing to reframe our perspective. Instead of saying, "This is terrible," we might ask, "What can I learn from this?" Or, "How can I respond differently?" By consciously reducing our complaints, we open ourselves to a more positive and empowered way of living. We begin to focus on solutions, express gratitude, and cultivate resilience. This shift doesn't mean ignoring challenges, but approaching them with a mindset geared toward growth and positivity. In essence, understanding and redefining our relationship with complaining is the first step toward a more fulfilling and empowered life. It's about reclaiming our narrative and choosing to speak words that uplift, inspire, and drive positive change. Words. Just sounds shaped by lips and breath, right? But oh, how powerful they are. Words build bridges, tear down walls, heal wounds, and start wars. They move nations, shape generations, and in your everyday life, yes, yours, they carry the potential to either brighten a room or cast a shadow over it. And when it comes to complaining, the words we choose are often the first clue to the life we're creating. Think about the language that fills your world, the internal chatter that plays like a soundtrack in your mind, the conversations over coffee, the text you send, the post you share, what energy are you putting out there? Because every word is a vibration. Every complaint, every sarcastic jab, every subtle criticism sends a message, not just to others, but to your own spirit. Let me ask you something personal. Have you ever been in a room where someone walks in and you can almost feel the air drop in temperature? Not because of anything they did, but because of how they speak. The murmured complaints, the habitual criticisms, the way everything is somehow not good enough. And then think about the opposite, that friend or loved one who lifts your whole day with just a sentence. They radiate gratitude, positivity, maybe even a little humor. It's not fake. It's rooted in their choice of words. It's their energy communicated through speech. When you begin the 21-day no complaining experiment, you're not just committing to stop whining, you're committing to a sacred shift in how you speak to the world and how you speak to yourself. That's not small. That's seismic. Let's go deeper. Neuroscientists and psychologists have studied the effects of language on the brain, and what they found is this: words literally rewire our brains. Every time you say something negative, you reinforce neural pathways that make it easier to think negatively in the future. Complaining repeatedly about traffic, or your coworkers, or your aching knees doesn't just vent your frustration. It conditions your brain to find more things to be frustrated about. That's why one small complaint so easily snowballs into a day of negativity. You're training your brain to expect trouble. But here's the good news, and it's real, empowering, change your life kind of good news. Just as we can reinforce negativity, we can also train our minds to lean toward joy, peace, and optimism. How? By being intentional with our words, by catching ourselves when we slip into complaint and choosing a different frame. That shift, simple as it may seem, can rewire your brain for resilience. Let me tell you a story. Years ago, I met a woman who had just overcome an incredibly difficult year. Divorce, job loss, health issues. But when she spoke, it was almost disorienting because she didn't sound bitter. She sounded grateful. Not in a performative, toxic positivity way, but in a grounded, soulful, almost reverent way. She said, "That year broke me open, but it didn't break me down." That is the power of words. That is a woman who decided not to let her circumstances write her narrative. She reclaimed her story through the language she used. Because language is not just how we express reality, it's how we construct it. When you describe a situation as impossible, your body reacts. Your energy drops, you give up before trying. But when you call that same situation a challenge, a teacher, or even moment, you shift your power. You engage your mind, you open space for growth. This experiment is about noticing those little words. Always, never, everything, nothing. Dramatic, exaggerated language that we toss around without thinking. I never get a break. Everything is going wrong. This always happens to me. When you start catching yourself, you start realizing just how much you've been cursing your own experience with exaggeration. And you begin to replace it with truth. Not sugar-coated truth, but expansive, empowering truth. This is hard right now, but it won't last forever. I feel frustrated today, but I've gotten through worse. It's a tough morning, not a tough life. Look at the power in those shifts. Another truth is this: the energy of your words doesn't just affect you. It spills into your relationships. Complaining is contagious. You've seen it, how one negative comment in a room can spiral into a full unventing session. Misery really does love company, but so does hope. So does kindness. So does strength. When you shift your language, you create a new kind of ripple. You inspire others to rise with you instead of sink with you. This is especially true in our most sacred spaces, our homes, our partnerships, our workplaces. Think about the tone of your last few conversations with people you love. Were they filled with connection, or were they steeped in complaint? Were you sharing joy, or were you subtly asking to be agreed within your frustration? It's not about blame, it's about consciousness. When we wake up to our patterns, we can choose better ones. And sometimes, the most dangerous complaints aren't the ones we speak out loud. They're the silent ones we repeat to ourselves. I'm not good enough. I can't do this. This always happens to me. The negative affirmations we murmur in the privacy of our own minds are the most insidious. They become identity. They become belief. So part of this 21-day journey is also about transforming our internal monologue. It's not about delusion. It's about compassion. It's about replacing "I'm such a failure" with "I made a mistake and I'm learning." That shift changes everything. You are not a victim of your words. You are their author. You decide what kind of life your language builds. And when you begin to speak with intention, when you become mindful of the energy you are releasing into the world with every sentence, your whole world changes. Let me offer you a mantra. I speak what I seek. Say it aloud. Let it settle in your spirit. You want peace. Speak it. You want love. Speak it. You want clarity, strength, grace. Speak it. Call it in with your voice. Call it in with your words. The world may not change overnight, but your energy will. Your awareness will. And once you start to speak from a place of grounded power instead of habitual complaint, you'll begin to magnetize better people, better moments, and better outcomes. The 21-day no planning experiment is a challenge, yes, but it is also a ceremony, a rite of passage, a sacred reclaiming of your voice and your vibration. You're not just cutting out complaints. You're planting new words, watering new beliefs, writing a new story. And if you stick with it, even when it's uncomfortable, you'll find yourself standing taller, speaking clearer, and living freer. Because words are not just words, they are tools. They are medicine. They are your magic. You cannot change what you are not willing to see. That's the quiet truth that sits at the heart of every transformation, especially this one. Because the first thing you discover in the 21-day no complaining experiment isn't how strong you are or how peaceful life becomes without complaints. No. The first thing you discover is just how much you've been complaining. And it's humbling. You may start this challenge thinking, I don't complain that much. But give it 24 hours. You'll catch yourself mid-sentence saying, "What? This line is so long," or "Why does this always happen to me?" You'll hear the grumble at the weather, the jab at your job, the irritation toward your family. And that's when it hits you. This isn't just a habit, it's a reflex. But that realization, that sting of awareness, that's where the magic begins. Because awareness is the light in the dark hallway. It's the moment you stop living on autopilot and start living awake. And waking up to our own words, our own energy is the first, most vital part of change. Once you hear yourself, truly hear yourself, you can't unhear it. You can't keep pretending that your words are harmless or that your mood is disconnected from your mindset. In this experiment, many people start with tools to bring awareness, a bracelet they move from wrist to wrist each time they complain, a journal to track their triggers, or a simple tally in their phone. These are more than gimmicks. They are mirrors. They show you patterns you didn't know you had. Maybe you complain the most during your morning commute. Maybe it's after scrolling social media. Maybe it's when you talk to a certain person. Seeing those patterns isn't failure, it's freedom. Because now you know, and once you know, you can choose. This is where something sacred happens and begin to create space between your trigger and your response, that space. That's your power. Instead of reacting automatically, you start noticing, oh, I'm about to complain. I'm feeling tired. I'm feeling stressed. That moment of noticing is the first breath of transformation. In that breath, you get to decide, do I feed this old story or do I try something new? And here's the thing, becoming aware doesn't mean you'll be perfect. You will complain. Probably a lot, especially at the beginning. But every time you notice it, you've already won. Every time you catch yourself and pause, you've already begun to rewire the script. This is why we say the first few days of the experiment aren't about being complaint-free. They're about becoming conscious. It's about witnessing your own habits without judgment. Because judgment doesn't help here. You don't need shame to change. You need compassion. You need curiosity. You need the courage to look at your patterns with love, not blame. When you start listening to yourself more closely, you'll also start hearing others differently. You'll notice how normalized complaining is in our culture. How often people bond through shared frustration instead of shared vision. But instead of joining in, you'll feel that tiny tug in your spirit, the invitation to rise above it, to shift the energy, to ask a better question, speak a softer truth, or simply stay silent and centered. Awareness is subtle, but it's sacred. It's not flashy. It won't earn you applause. But it is the foundation of every spiritual breakthrough, every healed relationship, every new beginning. Because you cannot fix what you refuse to see. You cannot rise above what you keep sweeping under the rug. So if all you do in the first few days, or even the first week, of this challenge is notice, then you are exactly where you need to be. You are peeling back the layers. You are learning your own rhythm. You are coming home to your power. And that is everything. Let's be honest. Life doesn't always go smoothly. We all have problems. Real ones, big ones, life-changing ones. So it's not about pretending the hard stuff doesn't exist. But there's a difference, an important one, between complaining and problem solving. And once you learn the difference, you stop leaking your power and start using it. Complaining is emotional discharge. It's a release of frustration without intention. It's saying, "This is terrible," without exploring what to do next. It's the loop we get stuck in. Why is this happening to me? Nothing ever works out. I can't believe I have to deal with this again. These words feel like relief in the moment, but they don't move the needle. They don't offer resolution. And most of the time, they don't even make us feel better long term. They just give us something to say when we feel helpless. Problem solving, on the other hand, is where your power lies. It doesn't always look dramatic or brave. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's messy. But it has direction. It says, "This isn't working. What can I do?" Or, "What can I talk to?" Or, "What part of this is mine to fix?" That mindset opens doors instead of slamming them shut. Let's take a simple example. Imagine you're at work and your manager hands you yet another project last minute again. You're tired. You're overwhelmed. Your first impulse might be to say, "This is ridiculous. They never plan. I always get dumped on." That's the complaint. And yes, it might be true. But does it help? Now imagine catching that thought, taking a breath, and saying instead, "I'm feeling stretched, and I need to figure out a better system or speak up." That's the pivot. That's when you shift from venting to vision. The truth is, most people, they're venting when they're really reinforcing helplessness. They repeat the same stories about their relationships, their bosses, their families, and mistake repetition for release. But repeating a complaint doesn't process the emotion. It embeds it. It cements it. The more you say it, the more real it feels. And pretty soon, you're not just dealing with a problem, you're living inside it. That's what makes this experiment so radical. It asks you to pause before you speak. To decide, am I just airing this out because I want attention or pity, or am I ready to find a step forward? Because if you're not looking for clarity, then maybe silence is the most powerful thing you can offer yourself in that moment. This doesn't mean you can't talk about your struggles. You can. You should. But be intentional. Be clear. Are you seeking support or just spiraling out loud? Are you asking for help or hiding in frustration? Are you stuck in a story or ready to write a new chapter? Problem solving about fixing everything right away. Sometimes it means asking better questions. Sometimes it means sitting with discomfort instead of escaping it. And sometimes it means admitting, "I don't have the answer right now, but I'm open to one." That openness is everything. It's what separates victims from creators. Because when you're truly in problem-solving mode, you become available for answers, for grace, for unexpected breakthroughs. You stop waiting to be rescued and start becoming the one who rescues yourself. Now, let's be real. Problem-solving is harder than complaining. It takes effort, presence, responsibility. It's not as seductive. It doesn't get as many nods from your co-workers or as many laughs at the lunch table. But it gets you something better. Freedom. It frees your energy from the cycle of rehashing. It frees your relationships from chronic negativity. It frees your mind to imagine new possibilities instead of circling old patterns. That's worth everything. So the next time you feel yourself about to complain, try this pause. Ask yourself, what do I want right now? Pity or power? You might not always choose the empowering response. And that's okay, you're learning. But even asking the question begins to shift your awareness. And that shift, it changes lives. This experiment isn't about perfection, it's about consciousness. And the moment you start choosing solution over spiraling, intention over impulse, that's when the real work begins. That's when you start stepping into who you were always meant to be, not just someone who survives life's challenges, but someone who transforms through them. Because every time you speak with purpose instead of pain, you rise. Every time you ask, what's next? Instead of, why me? You reclaim your story. And every time you choose your power over your complaint, you become a light for others still stuck in the dark. That's the kind of change that doesn't just last 21 days, it lasts a lifetime. Let's tell the truth right here, your energy speaks before you even open your mouth. Before you utter a single word, people can feel you. And more importantly, you can feel you. You know when you're carrying heaviness. You know when your spirit is worn down, tired, edgy. That energy doesn't just come from big life events. Often it's the quiet, constant drip of negativity. Complaints, grudges, low-grade bitterness. That drains you the most. That's why the 21 Day No Complaining experiment isn't just about words. It's about energy. It's about becoming the kind of person who shifts the room when they walk in, not because they're pretending to be positive, but because they've learned how to hold their power. See, every time you complain, you're giving a little piece of that power away. You're saying, this thing outside of me, this situation, this person, this traffic jam, has control over how I feel. But when you choose to hold your peace, even in discomfort, you reclaim your emotional space. And that is the beginning of resilience. Resilience isn't being happy all the time. It's not about being unaffected. It's about choosing to stay grounded even when life throws curveballs. It's the quiet strength that says, I can feel disappointment and still move forward. I can feel frustration without falling into bitterness. When you stop feeding complaints, you start building capacity. You become less reactive and more responsive. That means you don't explode every time something goes wrong. You breathe, you assess, you adapt. That's emotional maturity. That's spiritual stamina. Now here's the beautiful part. As your energy shifts, so do the people and opportunities around you. You start attracting different kinds of conversations. You notice beauty where you once only saw problems. You feel lighter, not because life got easier, but because you got stronger. Lighter doesn't mean shallower. It means unburdened. It means clear. Think about a day when you didn't complain, when you just rolled with things, laughed things off, chose to let go instead of hold on. How did you feel at the end of that day? Compare that to a day you spent in low-level grumbling. Same circumstances maybe, but wildly different experience. This is the energetic payoff of the experiment. You realize that complaining weighs you down, not just mentally, but spiritually. It keeps you stuck in the past or obsessing over the imperfect present. But presence, true presence, requires stillness. It requires room. And when you stop filling your space with complaints, you make room for peace to come in. You also begin to develop a deeper sense of gratitude. Not performative, not #blessed gratitude, but a deep appreciation for the little wins, for the silence between the storms, for the strength you didn't know you had. Because when you're no longer distracted by everything that's going wrong, you finally start to see what's going right. This is where resilience blooms. It blooms in your quiet decisions to pause, to pivot, to not let every minor inconvenience steal your light. You won't get it right every time. You'll complain. But over time, you'll notice it takes more to shake you. You'll bounce back faster. You'll laugh sooner. And that is growth. So no, this isn't just about being more positive. It's about being more powerful. It's about learning to manage your energy so that your spirit isn't at the mercy of every situation that doesn't go your way. That is emotional resilience. That is freedom. There is one practice that changes everything, not because it makes life perfect, but because it changes the way you show up to life. And that practice is gratitude. Not just the kind you write down in a journal at night, though that's powerful. I mean the kind of gratitude that lives in your bones. The kind that becomes your natural response to life, even when it's hard. Now, here's what's extraordinary when you take on the 21-day no complaining experiment. You don't just remove complaints, you start to replace them. And what most people don't realize is that the true antidote to complaining isn't silence, it's gratitude. Gratitude is the energy that fills the gap when complaining leaves the room. It's the new language your spirit begins to speak. You see, complaining focuses your energy on what's missing. What's broken, what didn't go the way you wanted. It's a scarcity lens. It tells your nervous system we're under threat. Even when you're not. Even when the thing you're complaining about is minor. The repetition sends a signal to your mind something's wrong. Something's always wrong. But gratitude is abundance in motion. Gratitude says, even though this isn't perfect, I still see what's beautiful. It doesn't deny your pain, it just widens your view. Let's say your car breaks down on the way to work. Complaining says, why does this always happen to me? This day is ruined. But gratitude, even through gritted teeth, might say, I'm grateful I wasn't in an accident. I'm grateful I have a phone to call for help. I'm grateful I'm safe. Now that might sound simple, but the emotional shift is profound. One reaction escalates your stress. The other grounds you in perspective. Gratitude is the anchor when everything around you feels like chaos. This doesn't mean you fake it. It doesn't mean you slap on a smile when you feel broken. It means you hold both truths. You say, this is hard, and I'm still thankful. That's a mature kind of joy. That's a deep kind of peace. What many people find during this experiment is that as their complaints drop, their awareness rises. They start noticing the small things, the warmth of the sun on their face, the kindness of a stranger, the cup of tea that tastes just right. Things they once overlooked become moments of quiet joy. That's what gratitude does. It reteaches you how to see. And here's the most incredible part. The more you practice gratitude, the less space complaining takes up in your life. Not because you're suppressing your feelings, but because you're nourishing your spirit. Complaining and gratitude can't live in the same breath. One pushes love away. The other invites it in. Gratitude is not just an emotion, it's a decision. It's a choice you make over and over again. Especially when it's hard. Especially when you're tempted to complain. And when you make that choice often enough, it becomes who you are. It becomes how you move through the world. I've heard people say, what if there's nothing to be grateful for right now? And my answer is start small. Start with breath. Start with your heartbeat. Start with the fact that you made it to another morning. That is not a given. That is grace. Gratitude doesn't require grand circumstances. It just requires your attention. It thrives in the ordinary, in the whisper, not the shout. In the moment you choose to see what's still good, even when life isn't easy. And here's something else to remember: gratitude multiplies. The more you see, the more you're given. Not in a material way always, but in clarity, in peace, and connection. Gratitude grows what you focus on. It turns a regular Tuesday into a miracle. It turns a shared meal into sacred time. It turns survival into celebration. So as you walk through this no complaint challenge, try this every time you're tempted to complain. Pause and name one thing you're grateful for. Out loud, say, I'm grateful for this breath. I'm grateful for the lesson I'm learning. I'm grateful that I can still grow. That's how you rewire your experience of the moment. That's how you take your power back. Because life isn't about never facing problems. It's about how you meet them. Do you meet them with resistance or with reverence? Do you meet them with fear or with faith? Gratitude will teach you how to lean toward the light, even on days when the light feels far away. And that's the real shift. That's where the complaining fades, not because you forced it, but because your heart is too full to waste words on what you can't control. Gratitude fills you up from the inside. It makes you resilient. It makes you generous. And most of all, it makes you ready for whatever life brings next. When you stop complaining, something amazing happens, not just inside of you, but all around you. Your relationships shift. Your conversations get lighter. The tension in your home, your workplace, your friendships, it begins to ease. Not because you're ignoring problems, but because you're no longer feeding them with constant negativity. We often don't realize how much of our communication is built on complaint. Think about it. How many conversations begin with, "I won't believe what happened to me," or "I'm so over this," Or can you believe they did that again? We bond over struggles. We connect through mutual frustrations. But here's the thing, connection built on complaints has a shallow foundation. It feels close in the moment, but over time it drains the relationship. It creates an atmosphere where problems grow louder than possibilities. When you remove complaining, you create space for something deeper. You begin to bond over dreams, ideas, hope, healing. Your presence becomes lighter, calmer, more intentional. And the people around you feel that shift. They may not be able to name it at first, but they feel safer, more at ease. They listen differently because you're speaking differently. And it goes both ways. When you stop complaining, you also stop absorbing complaints. You become more discerning about the energy you allow into your space. That friend who always brings drama. You love them, but now you notice the weight they carry. And you start choosing differently. Maybe you change the subject. Maybe you respond with kindness and redirection instead of matching their tone. You stop joining the spiral. That's how the ripple begins. Your kids start speaking more kindly because they hear fewer complaints in the house. The partner starts approaching conflict with more patience because the emotional air feels safer. Your coworkers relax because they're no longer surrounded by a storm of stress and sarcasm. You model a different way of being, and whether you know it or not, others see that, they feel it. And sometimes they follow. Relationships thrive when we create space for growth, not just venting. That doesn't mean you never express frustration. It means you do it with intention. You ask yourself, am I bringing this up to connect, to grow, to move forward, or just to unload? That kind of self-check builds emotional intimacy instead of emotional noise. And here's the beautiful part. When your relationships become more rooted in gratitude, honesty, and clarity instead of complaint, they don't just feel better. They last longer. They become places of rest, not just release. So when you take this no complaining journey, remember it's not just about you. Every word you withhold, every reaction you soften, every complaint you replace with compassion, it echoes. It ripples out to the people you love, the strangers you meet, the energy you carry into every room. And that ripple, that's where real change begins. Negativity is sneaky. It doesn't always show up as loud anger or obvious pessimism. Sometimes it hides in everyday habits, in the sarcasm you use to protect yourself, in the sighs you let out without thinking, in little dings you make when things don't go your way. Over time, you don't even notice it. You just think, this is how I talk. This is how life is. But what's really happening is an emotional addiction. Yes, addiction. To drama, to gossip, to feeling like the world is against you. Not because you're a bad person, but because it becomes familiar, comfortable even. Complaining gives you something to do with your discomfort. It's a quick hit of release, a moment of feeling seen. But it's temporary. And like any addiction, it leaves you emptier afterward. The 21-day no complaining experiment shines a bright light on this. It makes you aware. Suddenly you hear yourself mid-sentence and think, was that necessary? You feel the urge to complain, and instead of following it blindly, you pause. That pause is powerful. That pause is healing. It breaks the cycle. And when you stop feeding that habit, something incredible happens. You start craving peace more than the chaos. You start finding joy in stillness, not just in reaction. That's when you know the addiction is losing its grip. It doesn't mean you never feel negative again. Of course you will. Life is real. But it means you no longer let that negativity run the show. You stop being its servant and become your own guide. And that's freedom. When you stop complaining, something beautiful rises to the surface, silence. Not empty silence, but a kind of stillness that's full of wisdom. A stillness you may not have heard in a long time. That's what happens when you quiet the noise of constant negativity. You begin to hear yourself again. Complaining fills our minds with clutter. It's like static in the background of our thoughts, constantly reminding us of what's wrong, what's missing, what's broken. But when you remove that layer, your mind clears. And in that clarity, peace begins to grow. Inner peace doesn't come from a perfect life. It comes from how you respond to an imperfect one. The less time you spend rehearsing your problems, the more energy you have to resolve them, or to simply let them go. That mental space, that's clarity. That's you stepping out of survival mode and into awareness. And with awareness comes better choices. You think before you speak. You respond instead of react. You feel your emotions without being ruled by them. That's what clarity gives you. Control not over life, but over your experience within it. Over time, that becomes your baseline, not chaos, not confusion, but calm. Not because everything is easy, but because you've made peace your home, not your vacation spot. So when people ask, why do this no complaining thing? The answer is simple. Because peace is expensive and complaining is what costs you most. There's something profoundly empowering about realizing you don't have to react the way you always have. You don't have to complain just because things didn't go your way. You don't have to give your energy to every inconvenience. That realization, that's the beginning of growth. The 21-day no complaining experiment isn't just a challenge, it's an invitation to step into your power, to stop waiting for life to be perfect before you choose peace, and to start becoming someone who leads themselves with intention. Growth doesn't come in giant leaps. It comes in the quiet, everyday decision to do things differently, to pause before speaking, to reflect before reacting, to ask, what is this teaching me? Instead of, why is this happening to me? Every time you choose not to complain, you're actually choosing to lead, to take ownership of your mood, your mindset, your presence. That's what empowerment looks like. Not control over others, but mastery of self. And from that place, everything changes. You begin to see life as something you're creating, not just surviving. You meet challenges with curiosity instead of anger. You handle disappointment with grace. That's not weakness. That's strength rooted in awareness. And yes, you'll slip. You'll catch yourself mid-rant. That's okay. That's part of the process. What matters is that you noticed. Awareness is growth. And each time you come back to center, you build a new kind of muscle, emotional strength, spiritual depth, resilience. Because this experiment, it's not about being perfect. It's about becoming whole. And that's what growth truly is, returning to your power again and again until it becomes who you are. As you step into this 21-day no complaining experiment, you're not just eliminating complaints from your life. You are claiming your power. You are stepping into a space where your thoughts, your words, and your energy are no longer dictated by the challenges around you, but by the strength within you. Every time you resist the urge to complain, you're choosing peace over frustration, clarity over confusion, and growth over stagnation. And in that simple act of choosing, you begin to transform your life and the lives of everyone around you. The world is not perfect. Life will still throw its curveballs. But with every challenge, you have a choice. You can react or you can respond. You can complain or you can grow. And as you embark on this journey, remember, it's not about being perfect, it's about being powerful. So I invite you to take this challenge to heart, to embrace it fully, to see how your world shifts when you choose to live without complaints, and to watch how your spirit rises in ways you never imagined. This is your time, your transformation, a moment to claim the peace, clarity, and power that's always been within you. Let's begin.